I think this is something where we don't have to be divided over it. I think that's what I like about it. I think that's why I would put it in as my favorite American thing. Over the years of living in the United States, one of the most common questions that I get is, what is the best thing about the United States? And it's a difficult question to answer because, well, firstly, there are just so many things, right? There's so many aspects to not only living in the United States, but your entire surroundings. I could say the American people. I mean, I've had great experiences with American people. I'm married to an American person. She's a person. She's a people person, but she is a person. She's American, and I've met many Americans. I could say that, and I'd have some justification to some extent for doing so. I've met many good people here in the United States who've interested me with stories of their historic background, their heritage, and their sort of day-to-day experiences of living in the United States. And they're always experiences that are often vastly different to my own, because depending on where you live in the United States, those experiences will differ, because you have different state laws, you have different state, activities that one might do. You just have all of these sort of very varied things around the United States that can bring to the fore different stories from people. But my favorite thing about the United States isn't really any of those things, and it's not really people. I mean, unlike my wife, I'm not a people person. You know, that's why I spend all my time talking to a camera. My favorite thing about the United States is the great outdoors. The national park system specifically. It's amazing when I think about the lands that we see here in this country. I'm entirely enthralled by them. And there's a number of reasons for this. Firstly, the lands in this country, and of course any country on earth, but the very diverse lands in this country have been around millions of years before any of us set foot on these lands, and will survive long after we're gone. And to that extent, they're bigger than all of us. And I don't just mean the Grand Canyon is huge. Their aura and their existence and their grandiosity sort of outweighs our own existence in many ways. It's really just an honor that we get to share this world with them, whether or not you put a U in honor. It was John Muir whose writings and activism ultimately prompted the necessity or the need to have federally protected lands in this country. I got the chance to speak to my patrons on today's secret live stream, and it was interesting just how many sort of diverse experiences people had of national parks.
DJK, the Great Smoky Mountains has a national park designation, indeed. Nice place to visit and drive through. Fun fact about that, it's the most visited of all of the national parks in the United States.
I think given the mass diversity of land that you see here, and we'll get onto that in just a moment, I think it was very important that they be protected, right? They be preserved for humanity to enjoy. I know that sounds really pretentious, but I think it's true. I've especially felt that during this pandemic, when I've just been stuck essentially in this room, right? And all I could think was, I want to go and wrap my hands around a giant sequoia, because one thing you don't know about me is I have 70-foot arms. So I'm like Mr. Fantastic. Just this past week, the wife and I went for a walk in the woodlands of Illinois. And they're nothing to write home about, you know, even though I did actually write home to tell my mum. Weird thing. And it was just nice to see trees and red leaves and things like that. And it reminded me that we have national parks all across this country. And don't get me wrong, we have national parks in Britain, right? And they're fabulous. They're some of the most beautiful places in the world. I've often spoken about retiring in the Lake District when I'm 64. But there's something very unique about American national parks, and I think that uniqueness is told in some of the elements of those national parks that you don't find anywhere else in the world, like the very peculiar hot springs at Yellowstone National Park, like some of the dinosaur fossils that have been found. And I don't know what prehistoric wizardry conjured up sandstone arches in Utah, but architects in St. Louis will feel pretty stupid when they find out. And then there's Crater Lake in Oregon. Did you know that this is the deepest lake in the United States? It's the second deepest lake in the whole of North America. And as the name suggests, this is a lake housed inside a crater, right? And this crater was not formed by a falling meteorite, but by a collapsing volcano, which just goes to show that the Earth is amazing, unexpected, and really accident prone. And speaking of volcanoes, we have no active volcanoes in the United Kingdom. The United States has several, and if the Yellowstone caldera ever erupts, it's possible that future humans will designate the Western United States as one gigantic national park, though that's not expected to happen in our lifetime. And we can't really talk about national parks without talking about the Grand Canyon, right? It was formed millions of years ago when really clumsy tectonic plates accidentally shoved the land upward. This was the prehistoric equivalent of standing on a rake, except it happened in slow motion and nobody got hit in the face. And throughout the last 54 months of 2020, I'm pretty certain we've all had this sort of mental fantasy of packing up our bags, heading out to Devil's Tower and a plate of mashed potato. The idea being we make a sculpted replica, just like in Close Encounter of the Third Kind. It's been a long year, hasn't it? It's been a really long year. Over the years, I've been fortunate enough to visit some state parks, national monuments, national forests. Admittedly though, most of those have been the kinds of national parks where geological features aren't the front and center aspect of it. It's more the educational aspect. So Alcatraz, Ellis Island, the National Mall in Washington, DC. But it's worth pointing out that when I was in San Francisco, I did visit Muir Woods, which is a woodland that's dedicated to John Muir. It's also worth pointing out that John Muir was a Scottish-born American. So in some respects, without us, you wouldn't have had a national park system. That's arrogant. I mean, he was naturalized here. But those woods, they gave me my first glimpse of a redwood trees. Not quite the really big redwoods that you find in California, but still, being that close up to humongous trees not only gave me that feeling of, wow, I'm really small and irrelevant, aren't I? But that I really haven't seen America at all. You know, I get on this camera every week and talk about America, but in many respects, that is America. You know, the outdoors, and it's all so awe-inspiringly varied. And we're talking about huge trees, but we're also talking about gigantic mountains, vast canyons, active volcanoes, jagged edges that look like they were chiseled in by a giant. There's so much, you could lose yourself for years and years. I mean, in some cases people do. I don't want to do that, but I definitely want to get a visual sense for this, because you can't really do that in photographs. You can't really get an awareness of the wonder of the entire thing that way, nor through Flight Simulator. You know, I'm using this as a superficial replacement for what I now can't have, but hopefully will do soon. It's been a tense year and couple of weeks here in the United States, and I found some solace in thinking about some of these places and how I might get out to them. And I think one of the good things about national parks, the great outdoors, and all of that is we can all agree on it. You know, you might find some people who, for instance, think the Grand Canyon is boring, right? There are always naysayers. Surprisingly, even Uncle Toby was impressed with the Grand Canyon. The point is, I think this is something where we don't have to be divided over it. I think that's what I like about it. I think that's why I would put it in as my favorite American thing. John Muir once wrote, "Living artificially in towns, we are sickly and never come to know ourselves." He was using sickly in that sort of 19th century way. But it does make me think about, you know, we do get bogged down living in our day-to-day lives, sometimes quite busy lives. In my case, in a major city. And although my hair is starting to give him a run for his money, the trappings of 21st century life could be very much alleviated if we all gave up and lived on a hill. It'd be very hard to do this YouTube channel, come to think of that. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below some of your favorite national parks or places of interest in the great outdoors. And if you would like to support this channel and the work we do, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. We have plenty of videos in the pipeline coming up here in November, so stay tuned. Bye. you.